Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Just putting everything together here really quickly. Oh boy, this is the one everyone's been asking about, the post-election economic update and recap. Before I get started, for anyone who's listening to this for the first time or listening to the recording later, my name is Kristina and I'm the Chief Economist and Portfolio Manager of Sequoia Wealth Advisors. And I do these webinars roughly once a month or more or less often, depending what's happening in the economy. It's just an opportunity to share some updates on not only the economy, but a lot of issues that are happening in the world that could also have an impact on the economy. And the intention of it is to make it clear and understandable to everyone listening, and also to get your most burning questions answered. So that being said, thank you very much for all of you who sent questions in advance. For any of you listening live, please send your questions in, and I recommend sending them in earlier in the presentation rather than later to be sure I get to all of them. Even if I cover that topic, it's better to have it in. I have had a couple of times people said, I didn't get my question answered, and it's usually because they pop up the last 5-10 minutes or so. So send the questions over. I totally understand that we've got hundreds of people registered for this thing, but there's only so many of you that can actually do 1 o'clock on a work day because of other obligations. So if you are live and you have questions, definitely put them up there, and I will do my very best to answer each and every one of them. Final disclaimer, especially again, for any of you who are new to listening to this, nothing I'm saying here today is in any way to support or not support any political candidate or anything to do with the election, politics and whatnot. I'm here simply to talk about the economics as best we know it today, and also to answer those questions as well. I fully understand that there's a lot more that goes into people's decision making, and at this point, reaction to the decisions or the results of the election, than just the economics of it. And that's not really my area that I'm here to talk about today. Yeah, I just want to make sure that I was coming across as talking economics here. Not going to get into the political and the social aspects. Unless, of course, you have a specific question that you feel has an economic component, do not be afraid to ask it. I literally will answer anything that comes across. Well, anything that comes across that makes sense as far as the presentation today. So with that being said, what I'm going to start with is kind of the high level. Most of you, if not all of you, know the results of the election at this point. So when I last spoke at the previous webinar, the biggest, I don't call concern, but uncertainty that surrounded the election was it going to be as close as the polls projected? And if so, would we know the results right away? Not only would it take a while to count if it was very close, but also too, there could be protests or people not accepting the vote. And in that case, it may take longer, as we saw in 2000 and to a different degree and also in 2020. That being said, obviously the election went very smoothly as far as the process was concerned. There was no really big issues, and we pretty much knew the results by the end of the night. With how it goes, though, there are still some areas that are still voting and still counting, still counting votes. We don't have the full clarity, I believe, on the House at this point. We have a pretty dang good idea of how things are going to shake out. Just again, some more detail. I had a few people push back and say it's ridiculous it takes this long with modern technology to count all the votes. The answer to that is if it's really close, every vote really matters. And personally, I'd rather they take their time and get it right than take any shortcuts and then have a question in the future. So as I said, we're still settling out, I think, some of the final House seats, I believe. At this point, though, we got a pretty good idea of the makeup. The thing that was the most surprising is the scope in which the Republicans swept, not only at this point, it appears the House, the Senate, the presidency. The bigger move was how much the shift was, even in traditionally very blue, very Democratic states that voted around 40% plus towards the Donald Trump. That was a really big move, and the shift overall that went a bit rightward across the board. And another little interesting component, I bring this up because of the economic components, was there was a lot of voting, let's call it voting Republican or voting for Trump on the national scale, but still potentially keeping Democratic senators and House people because they were happy with the work they're doing, especially if they were more moderate. So you didn't see this voting all on the ticket. You actually saw people breaking it apart based on who they felt was best. So that was also a really notable thing. Nevada being a really good example. Nevada is a swing state. It's very purple, went for Trump on the national scale. However, in the Senate kept Rosen, who is a Democratic senator. So you've seen that in a number of states. Why does this matter economically? We'll get into the policy here in just a moment. Because the election now is over and we pretty much know how things are, that's step one. And the big question I've gotten recently is, why is the market rallying? Why is the market so excited, especially if they didn't like the results of the election? And the biggest thing, and I've mentioned this before, markets hate uncertainty. Really close election in a really polarized time means there can be a lot of uncertainty on what the results will be and when they'll know it. Markets hate uncertainty. So the market, though, was actually really stable coming up to the election. It was rising. I mean, why was the market rising? There's all this uncertainty. We don't know the results of the election. Well, first off, the market actually follows the betting markets, not the polls, which turned out actually to be the right choice because the betting markets actually got it right. The market was following the betting market, and the stock market was following the betting market and was tied in. And even just running up, even on the day of the election, Trump was running 60% ahead or so, somewhere in there. I don't follow it that closely. That was following. The other thing was earnings was coming out. The numbers were pretty good. Economic data was good. The idea the Fed would make another cut. There was a lot of underlying positive economic issues going on or data going on. That was also helping there too. So these two things really help keep the markets pretty stable up till the election. And I'll get into a little bit about the economy in just a moment. The results mean, oh, thank God it's over. There's no more surprises. We kind of know how things are going because it's been so, again, sort of very much a red sweep. We're unlikely to see any big changes to tax increases, any big regulatory changes. All the things that usually have more of an impact on the markets were kind of basically went away. And so then you saw the post-election rallying, and anytime you have a clarity, right, you know, the winner accepts, the other side concedes, off to the races. And that, again, is a little bit of a relief rally and also an idea that we wouldn't be any big tax surprises, wouldn't be any big regulatory surprises. That's what I call the initial euphoria of the market. Now what we got to watch, and this is the really important parts to watch because we still don't know a lot. And this is every single administration that comes in. There's a degree of uncertainty. Someone who's been in Washington a long time, there's a bit less of it. But there still is, because they always want to make a name for themselves. They may do things differently when they're president as opposed to when they were senator, and whatnot. And you saw this even with Biden, who's been in politics his whole life. He did make a lot of changes when he got into the position of president because he wanted to create his legacy that was different than what he did as a senator. So the next couple of months here between the results of the election being over, and the actual inauguration, the Trump team will put together their people. Okay, who are they going to have in various positions of power? Some of these positions can be appointed by the incoming president. Other ones will have to go through Congress. But the selection of these people show us, as economists, what are they going to focus on? What kind of people are they putting in? What are these people's history? And what we're starting to see in the early stages of this is that, again, like him or hate him, like the people he's putting in or hate him, they are at least people with experience. One thing that Trump has mentioned, and he said this publicly, so I'm not picking on him, is that he made a lot of mistakes when he came in 2016, and he really didn't know what he was doing. His words, not mine, so don't throw any tomatoes at me. And this time around, he's better prepared for finding the people that he feels will be best for the roles that he's putting in place. Again, a lot of them still have to be officially go through Congress, but you're getting a sense of who he's putting into these positions. And that kind of gives you an idea of where he's going to focus. So this will happen between now and inauguration. Still, that doesn't give us enough information. It gives us an idea, but not enough. So the big point, and the biggest point of potential changes to portfolio and economic changes, really isn't going to happen until the spring. So I just want to set everybody's expectations there. Because just because we know who won, and just because we know who they appointed, we don't know what they're going to do and how they're going to do it and how they're going to pay for it. So that is a really big question. That has the biggest economic impact on all of this. And I'll talk about a few of the kind of the bigger issues that have come up. The one I get a lot of questions on is just examples of how this may play out. And again, send in your questions and I'll get more specific if there's interest. So a couple of biggies that have an economic impact. Okay, so I'm going to talk about three. One is immigration. Okay, so Trump ran on the fact that he was going to deport illegal immigrants. That was a big, big thing, that the border is not secure. There's a lot of bad people here, his words, not mine. And he was going to do a deportation. What that looked like, you know, again, when they're campaigning, they're very noisy, the candidates. It's hard to know what that's going to look like. So how this shakes out is going to make a big difference from the economics. Again, I'm going to hold back on the social aspects and the rest of it. I'm getting into the economics here. If he focuses on, or his administration focuses on, let's say, the criminal element. I forgot the exact number, but there was hundreds of thousands, I believe, of, and again, please don't quote me on that, of known violent criminals that had come across. And if he focuses on those and the deportation of those people, he probably won't get a lot of pushback, right? Because most people agree that that's not the kind of people that we wish to have in this country. And that kind of deportation of the illegal immigrants, or sorry, whatever the proper word is, immigrants, wouldn't have less of an impact economically. It would have less of an impact socially, and would probably have more support. On the other hand, if it gets larger in scope or scale, the challenges are going to be much greater. Economically, huge impacts on our economy. I don't think I'm telling any tales here when I say that a lot of people that are out working in our economy, especially in agricultural, are not necessarily documented people. There can be really big impacts there. So finding a way to not disturb that, to create some legal process in that space, while also having people that are not, you know, ideal from a social standpoint, again, criminals and things like that, could get done. He could say, I'm doing what I said I was going to do, and he's not going to disrupt massively the economy. Again, I don't wish to offend anyone here. I get that there's a lot of different viewpoints on this. I'm talking about examples of way things can be done. Anything large scope, large scale, first, there's a massive cost to that. Next, there's massive social disruption to that. Third, and this is a challenge that Obama, Trump, and Biden have dealt with, a lot of these countries don't want the people back that are criminals. They just simply don't want them back. And in the past, they said, well, here, you got to take them back, but here's some money, which is what's been done in the past, or they get sent to third countries, which is more common. So just because you want to send people back doesn't mean you can, and there's a lot of complexity and, again, a lot of cost. I'm going to get into costs in a moment because that's a biggie from the economic standpoint. So I hope just touching upon this is really knowing how things are going to happen, how they're going to be paid for, and what that process is going to be is really going to help us better understand. And I don't feel like we're going to have that anytime soon. Talk about tariffs. Okay, tariffs is a big one. This is the one that's been realized. If Trump puts all these tariffs out there, it's going to raise the cost to everybody. You know, and it would, right? It would massively increase costs if you just this massive tariffs, because obviously the cost would get passed on to the consumers. However, tariffs in themselves are not a bad word. Every single administration has used tariffs in some form or another. When Biden came in, he didn't get rid of the majority of Trump's tariffs. He kept them. He added his own tariffs on top of that, like the 100% tariff on electric vehicles. Chinese-made electric vehicles. Why? Presidents use it both to protect domestic businesses and industry, and also to help contain our adversaries. There's a lot of reasons tariffs are used, and if they're used wisely, with thought, and working with our partners on these tariffs, so there's a little bit more cohesiveness, not going out alone, you actually can accomplish good things from an economic standpoint. It's not that damaging. So how, when, where, all the technicalities of tariffs will tell us whether it's going to be an impact to the economy or not, or a minor or a major, and if it's necessary. The highest hope for me, again, from the economic perspective, is when you're putting them in, you're telling us why, and just upfront with that. Why are we doing this? So you can really understand it, rather than oh, I'm gonna do a tariff. The final one that I really want to share is probably one of the biggest risks, and this does not matter whether it was going to be Harris or Trump or anyone else, is government spending levels. They're getting to the point at this point where the bond markets are getting a little nervous. Okay, we're seeing that. It's solvable. We're at the early stages of bond market nervousness, but the bond market's getting nervous. It's like, we got to cut back on the spending. And when politicians run for office, what do they say? We're going to give you everything. The Democrats will give you different stuff than the Republicans, but tax cuts have a cost. More government spending has a cost. We have to pay for it. And the challenge has been is that the deficit is rapidly rising. We have a huge, I think we're at 35 trillion or so right now, probably 36 closer. And it's at the rate of this debt levels is massive. It's just massive. And we've been able to get away with it because we're the strongest economy in the world, and we can print our own money and other people buy our money because it's the most stable most stable economy in the world, right? You're going to get your money back. So treasury bonds sell with abandon, even at these high debt levels. Most, if not all countries in the world couldn't get away with it. China's trying something right now. We'll see how that plays out. We've been able to do it, and that's mean that the politicians haven't been really honest with us. They haven't had to say, hey, I want to give you all this stuff, but your taxes are going up. Oh, I want to give you all this stuff, but we got to cut this other stuff out. Like they haven't had to be honest because they've been able to just, run up the debt, right? Nobody really notices. The bond markets are smarter than the stock markets, far more powerful than the stock markets. And if the government doesn't figure out how to control this in the upcoming years here, and I would say within this decade, we're going to start to see the results of that, and they're not going to be pretty. So it's going to be very important for the Trump administration to show how they're going to pay for anything they want to do. Okay? And this has been said, and it's been said more, we're going to cut back on this spending. That becomes a challenge, right? Because if you're going to cut back on spending and you don't want to raise anybody's taxes, maybe you want to cut more taxes, because don't forget, Trump promised no taxes on tips, no tax on Social Security, no taxes on overtime. I don't know how much of this he's going to get done, but those all have costs. How can he balance out? Can he show that we're paying for it? Cuts to programs, there's going to be pushback no matter what that is. There's going to be a pushback no matter what that is, because every single dollar cut, even if it's a completely wasted dollar, somebody will come out and say, oh, the children, oh, the elderly, oh, this group, that group, because it's a political fight. There is room to solve for this, though. I am kind of a geek I don't care about politics much. I don't care about Washington much more than I have to do my job. But I do like to read what the Congressional Budget Office and the U.S. Government Accountability, the GAO. So the GAO and the CBO are two government departments that are kind of like the accountants of the government. They are nonpartisan. They just report the numbers as they are. And it's really fascinating to see how much money that they can account for. Trillions. These are their numbers. They can be accounted for. How much waste and duplications. So 3 or 4 government departments doing the same exact thing. It's just redundancy. And so they come out with this whole idea. Here's how you could save trillions of dollars, or hundreds of billions of dollars at least, if you take all these steps. But they don't have any power, so they just give it to Congress, and it dies a quiet death. There is ways to come and just clean up redundancy, just to get rid of all this. We can't figure out where the $2 trillion went in the last 3 years. Actually doing proper accounting for all of this and cleaning this up would mean you wouldn't have to cut, and you wouldn't have to do things that are more politically difficult, and you could also free up a lot more money. So there is opportunity based on what the CBO and the GAO have told us, and all this is available on cbo.gov, gao.gov. Please go look out for yourself. Never listen just to one person to see. So I want to give you that kind of optimistic idea instead of it has to be a fight between lower taxes, less spending, and the ongoing competition between the two of them. The biggest pushback and risk is going to be the government departments. Nobody wants to give up their power. Everyone, Department of Labor, Department of Justice, EPA, every single one of them has their own power, and all they want to do is grow it. So giving up any money, giving up any power, giving up any more regulations that they can enforce and get more money is really, really, really hard to do. That's the way it works in Washington. And remember, a lot of people in Washington, they survived multiple administrations. They're so powerful, you can't get rid of them if you tried. They're way more powerful than, a Democrat or Republican or incoming administration, going administration. So change inside, structural change in Washington is going to be a great big challenge, even for a party that has a mandate in the short term. So again, hopefully this was useful, kind of very, very high level, touchy upon a lot of things with this. But there's going to be the biggest risks with this new incoming administration, and it didn't matter whether it's Harris or Trump, is not only the deficit spending, the other one is the geopolitical situation, both economic and I call it military. We all know we got some big conflicts going on in the world. We need to find solutions to these conflicts because we don't want a little one to become a big one. So Russia and Ukraine, now we got North Korea involved. It is not too far away from potentially spiraling to a much greater conflict that we get sucked into it militarily. And I'm not saying this again to be negative or fear-mongering. I'm saying that it doesn't take much when you start adding other countries into a regional conflict for things to get a little bit worse, a lot worse. Same thing going with the Middle East. To be able to find a way to resolve the ongoing conflicts and ongoing conflicts that are happening there. China, well, North Korea, of course, the military, and China on the economic scale, potentially the military scale, depending on what happens with Taiwan. We've got a lot of big stuff going on in the world, and that is a big risk if we cannot find solutions to these conflicts. They could spiral out of control, and then in some cases, the economics would actually be the least of our concerns. So really, that area is the incoming administration going to be able to find solutions to this. They're not going to be easy solutions. People are not going to be happy with them, especially if they have a vested interest on one side, quote unquote, winning or the other. And it will be challenging now because you do have a big shift in global order where a lot of these countries or adversaries have come together and created their own alliances. So working through this and trying to come back to a way that we can give countries their autonomy, but also protect other countries. I can't say I envy the people that will need to navigate this space, but that's some really big things that are coming up a little bit outside of the details. But however, it's going to be something that's going to have impacts. So what are the markets and economy going to look at with all of this? Really, the biggest thing is going to be, again, I talked about the initial thing, is more and more people are appointed or proposed to be appointed. I'm probably not using the right Washington terms, but the ones that still have to get vetted through Congress. Is it people get put into position or even proposed in a position before the Trump administration comes in? Who are these people? They know how to do their job. Doesn't mean you agree with them or like them. Do they know how to do their job is an important thing. And then where are they going to focus? Because they can't do everything. Where are they going to focus first? And then how is it going to be unrolled? And how's it going to be paid for? So right about March or April show, I'm probably going to have a really good speaker come in as well. It's going to be the Washington guy that knows this way better than I do, and to kind of talk about the economics of the policies and proposals that are being unrolled. And just because the Republicans have the House, the Senate, and the presidency does not mean that they're just going to get everything through wholeheartedly. It's going to be very important for them to find ways to work with at least the moderate side of the Democratic Party to get things passed, because the more support they'll have, the more likely they can last through the midterms if there's a change there. So it's again, won't be the bull in the china shop. There's still going to need to be negotiations and whatnot. So touch upon those kind of really high levels thing. I'm going to talk a little bit about the economy, and I'm going to hop into questions, and if time permits, then go back to the other part of it. So the underlying things in the economy I talked about that have been the strength. I talked before about the economy slowing, and here's a really funny and interesting thing. The economy is slowing. It's actually slowing. And while you're not feeling it is the government spending is actually buffering it. So like we're seeing the numbers on unemployment, we're seeing the numbers, we're seeing the signs, all the normal signs of slowdown. But each time it starts to slow, the Fed goes, oh, we'll cut interest rates a little bit, or we get another tranche of government money come there. It's kind of actually bolstered this growth period longer. Now, this is where my talk about the economy splits. Let's just say there's at least two economies, probably more. For the simplicity of time today, let's talk about the economy that people who own assets are experiencing and the economy that people who don't own meaningful assets are experiencing. Because oftentimes I get the question from people, it's like, why is inflation such a big deal? Well, if you have a certain level of wealth and income, you can absorb these higher costs. You may not like it, but you can absorb it, right? Your utility bill is going up, the cost of your groceries is going up, the cost of other things is going up. You can absorb it. If you don't have this asset appreciation and rising income in the same way, you can't as well. It's squishing you so much more. And that's why you're seeing a lot of people really being crushed by the fact their utility bill is doubling, their insurance is going up. And in isolation, one or two of these things, they can absorb them, but everything is rising at once. And when you hear inflation's getting better, it's just not going up as fast. Okay, if it's going up at 2.5% instead of 9%, as it was a couple years ago, that's a good thing, right? It's going up more slowly, but it's still rising. It's not going down. So people are getting squished. And there's not a realistic scenario where wages can even keep up with that. So people who have a lot of assets, they feel like even if they're not using that money or touching it, say, okay, my portfolio is doing better. My house is appreciating. I feel like I have some buffer here, even if I'm not touching that money. But people who don't have that. And that's really important thing to understand, is that the economy is different. And actually, truly, it's different. There's a lot more different for a lot more people, a lot more different ways. I was just trying to keep it simple here. It depends on what it costs you to live the life that's important and valuable to you in relation to what you have available to you. And that's why you're seeing this big difference. So the challenge, again, that's a challenge or opportunity for the incoming administration, is how can they promote the growth of our economy without constraining it with too much regulation or government control or redistributing of assets and whatnot, wealth, and also get the wages to rise, the cost to come down, and help voice the side of the economy that's not experiencing the asset appreciation. That can be done. There's a lot of different ways to do it. Is that going to be a focus going forward? Because that is something that is very important to a lot of people and a lot of people that voted for the Trump administration. So that's going to be from an economic perspective. There are ways to do it, but it will be a careful threading the needle, because you won't be able to lift all boats in the same way. It's the idea of providing that opportunity and providing balance without taking away the ability for growth and too much government control. Again, I won't get into the ways of doing it because I'm clearly not in office. So what I think doesn't matter. From this perspective, however, there are solutions for this, and it's possible to do because the Democrats lost by such a wide margin. And a lot of that, I mean, there's a million probably reasons. I'm sure there's a lot of people analyzing why that is. But one that came across was people didn't really feel like the issues that were important to them were being addressed. So for the Democrats to come and say, hey, we hear you, we're going to figure out ways to get more people benefiting from this. And again, I'm not saying it's a Democrat Republican thing. Anytime the party's in that position with loss, how do they come back and say, hey, we hear you, to rebuild themselves for the next election cycle? So this may be an opportunity to have some bipartisanship here. How do we help solve for not everyone navigating this economy in the same way? So I hope that was a kind of high level. I can get more specific into sectors, but I will say only one thing at this point. Don't assume just because Trump's coming in and he's going to do all these things that certain sectors are going to benefit or not benefit from that. That is an area that can get people in a lot of trouble. Okay, so I'm not allowed to give investment advice or recommendations on a public forum. So for those of you who want to talk to me offline, you definitely can, and I can talk to you more specifically about types of investments. On a high level, though, that kind of mistake that's often made is people say, oh, this person's coming in, these are the things they're going to focus on, I'm going to invest there, it's going to do very well. But then I can tell you a really fun fact in recent history. The green energy space actually did far better under the Trump administration than it did under the Biden administration. So if you went and bought green energy stocks when Biden came in 2020, when he came in 2021, you would have lost a lot of money. Right? You would have made more under Trump, and that doesn't make sense. Why? Trump was definitely not the environmental president. Biden was really focused on that space. There's a lot of reasons why that happened. A lot of reasons. Don't make assumptions that because someone's coming in that a certain sector is going to do well, because you don't know how, when, and the specifics. And there are some areas that will do well regardless. Again, we know the outcome of the election, but almost regardless, because we have to solve for it. We don't have a choice. That is energy. We need more sources of energy at a rapid scale. Energy production in this country is going to scale rapidly. And you saw that with Biden just today approving, I think, two-thirds, I don't remember the exact amount. I haven't read the report yet, but a massive investment in nuclear power. The energy that is needed to power AI is extraordinary. We aren't even close to what we need to get there. I'm not even getting into electric cars and the rest of it. We need to rapidly ramp up our energy production in this country, and that is one of the solutions. And that is something that could potentially be beneficial regardless. However, should you or shouldn't you? Depends on your specific situation. So again, not investment advice. These are examples of areas that we're going to need to focus on, especially I could have a whole webinar just about what's going on in the AI space right now. It's pretty phenomenal. Okay, I'm going to hop into questions really quickly because I want to be absolutely sure, and there's a lot of them, that I answer them. And then if time permits, I'll go back into more details. Two other things, though, I do want to mention at this point. Number one is if there's a topic that's of interest to you, let me know. I have access to a lot of really, really smart people, really great speakers and great experts, and I'm happy to bring them in so you don't have to listen to me for an hour. So just let me know what areas are of interest to you. Bob Stein's really popular. I can always bring him back again. He might be a good one for the Washington report, like in the spring. We're gonna have our live event live, and also we'll live stream on Zoom in middle of February. It's gonna be kind of the bigger economic outlook, and we'll have one of our very popular speakers back from previous on that one. Okay, so I'm gonna jump into questions, and there's a bunch. So like I said, get him in. I got a half hour so I can get him done. What will Elon Musk do for Trump? Isn't it dangerous to have billionaires running the government? Well, billionaires have always run the government behind the scenes, sometimes more openly and sometimes behind the scenes. The Harris campaign raised over $1 billion in 3 months. That was not small donors. There's a lot of very powerful, very wealthy people that can potentially benefit from one person or the other. Sometimes they're doing it purely for financial reasons, like Mark Cuban for his name, the Shark Tank guy. He was a big supporter of Harris. However, his company standed to benefit massively on the proposals they had for prescription drugs, generic prescription drugs. There was a financial incentive. And I'm not picking on him. Maybe he dearly believed in Harris and loved her and wanted to support her in that well. And he was also very conciliatory towards Trump when he came in. So I'm not trying to pick on the guy or say he's bad or anything like that. But there was certainly a financial incentive there. And that's just the ones you know about, right? But you're not getting $1 billion in 3 months from people that don't have a lot of money. So all campaigns, and we can get a whole conversation about politics and money and politics. I think the difference is that Trump's more open about it, whereas other people may be more private about it. But there's always been money in politics, and there's always been people. And there, obviously, there's a whole lot of things that you want to watch. Again, I'm going to use an example here, so I'm not picking, I'm making an example. When Elon Musk switched from a Democrat and supporting Democrats, politicians and causes, toward the Republican side, he started getting a lot more pushback from the government regulatory departments that are overseeing his various businesses. For an example, money would go to unions only, but not to non-union shops, which impacted Tesla, right? So you can see politicians taking action against or support of various companies based on their support for them. This has happened, and I'm not a political expert, but this is not an uncommon thing. Sometimes it's super overt, like it was between Biden against Elon Musk. Other times it's more private. So really what you're going to want to watch for is just make sure that no laws are broken. There's not anything that's like really, truly harmful and or beneficial towards him one way or the other. It is outside of my scope to talk about what that would be because I don't know. But anyway, having a billionaire's support is not an unusual thing and certainly not specific or unique to Trump. So we'll watch and we'll see what happens over time. The other question is going to be, ties to this, that people ask is that he would have a role in the government. I don't know if he will do it and what that role would be. Maybe he would be advising in some fashion, which would not be uncommon again. That presidents use either advisory committees or advisors in various sectors of industry. So that would not be abnormal. I personally don't have any idea how Elon Musk would have the time to take a government job with all the rest of the things he's doing. So let's just see how that goes. That's really all I can comment on. Should we expect more volatility, assuming the markets? Most certainly, most certainly. That's always the case, right? It's what you know and what you don't know, right? So yes, expect volatility, and your investments should be very carefully aligned for your specific goals and your needs. That is way more important than what the market's going to do. And that's important to speak with either myself, our team at Sequoia, or your own advisors to make absolutely sure you understand what your current allocation could do when there's market disruptions. You should know that. You should know it in dollars and percentages. Because if you can't accept that, you want to rebalance while we're up high, not when we're down low. So make sure to have that conversation. It's always a good check-in point. What I hear from people are so often is, oh yeah, I forgot that could happen. Talk about it every year, but all of a sudden when it happens, it's real, right? So it's good to have that check-in point, especially when things are higher. It's a great chance to reallocate if your risk tolerance isn't lined up. Tariffs and trade, question mark. I think I touched upon that, so I'll save that, and if time permits, I'll go into it deeper. How will Trump treat California? I have no idea. I literally have no idea. I would guess it sort of depends on how everything shakes out. Is it going to be a fight against Newsom and against Trump? Is Trump going to go after California? I doubt it. A thing to keep in mind is almost maybe over 40%, but let's say 40% of Californians voted for Trump. That's shocking because California is blue, 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 and still 40% voted for him. So I would imagine Newsom may be thinking about where he wants to focus and where he doesn't, because he wants to make sure that the voters are happy with him and not feeling not heard. So I think it would just depend very much on what Trump does and what he's willing to accept and not. But he can't go after a state. There'll be a whole bunch of legal issues, which may or may not stop him. But that being said, I would say it's a wait and see, but it does have a lot to be. If it's going to be resistance from California from day one, it's going to be more difficult than, hey, we'll wait and see how he's going to behave. So I hope I answered that properly. Are people actually leaving the country after the election? Question mark. I don't know. I don't know. I would imagine there are people who are looking at that or considering it, depending on of course, their political views. But I don't know at this point to what scale and to what scope. Ultimately, making that decision, there's a lot of planning considerations that you want to clearly understand. There's a lot of considerations living in other countries you understand. There's a lot of tax implications of living in other countries you understand. So if you are making, or if you are considering a move to another country, and again, it doesn't have to be around politics and the election for any reason. Even if moving to another state, definitely work with financial planners, with your tax planners, with your team. I know I've done a lot of planning for people that have moved from states, moving out of California to another state, et cetera. And just moving from one state to another has a lot of planning considerations. So certainly another country has a lot more. So my recommendation would be to anyone considering that, no matter where you are in the planning process, is to definitely make sure that you fully understand all the elements and all the considerations with making that move. What will Trump do about inflation? We don't know yet. No answer. I don't have an answer because I don't know what the policies are going to be and the specifics are going to be. So we'll see. You can make it worse. You can make it better. But there's a very small limit on what the president can actually do about inflation. If he can cut back on the government spending, if he can do a number of other things, there's some regulatory, some tax, some spending, there's a lot of things that are available. The challenge is going to be ultimately is the government spending is the big driver of this right now. Really big driver of this. And it's not the disruptions through the pandemic when we were pumping a ton of money in the system, but we had a supply chain issue. Now it's just government spending. So he has the power to make a big difference, but will he do it? I don't know yet. Looking at selling my home and moving out of state. Is this a good time? Depends. Depends on your situation. Because I know who this is. It's really, really important. This is a really good idea to work with a financial planner. Obviously, we do that at Sequoia, and I'm not saying you have to work with Sequoia. Certified financial planners really can help you understand the full implications from a financial cost standpoint. However, that's only an understanding layer. The deeper level is where you want to be, where it's going to make you happy, what's right for you. So I just want to bring that up. There's a lot more to it. I mean, we pay for what we value. And so one person's like, oh, no way I'm paying that. Another person's like, it's totally worth it. I got to be closer to the grandbabies, right? So I just want to say definitely planning is going to be key. Okay, there is a conspiracy theory out there that a group of people are trying to crash the American dollar and push people to cryptocurrency. Any thoughts? It would be impossible for any group to do that. Only people that can crash the dollar is literally the United States. No, not quite. There are some other ways it can be done by people that hold a lot of our debt. It would be very, very difficult for a group of people, even a large group of people, even all the people that own a cryptocurrency to do that. Just purely numbers, just this size of the US economy, the size of dollar-dominated assets, it would be an almost impossible thing to do. Are there groups that would like to shift us away from the dollar and the fiat currency system into this other system? Most definitely. This has been going on for a very long time, even before the cryptocurrencies existed. Will there be a time when the cryptocurrencies are going to become legitimate currencies? Because right now they're not currencies because they don't hold a value. Right now they are investments, right? They're a trading vehicle. They're not technically a currency. People, they call them a currency, people use them as a currency, but they're not because they don't have an underlying value. Could that change in the future? Could we have a US-based digital currency that is overseen by the Federal Reserve and backed by tangible assets? Most certainly. It's quite possible. It's been talked about. It hasn't really gone far yet. So we'll have to see. There could be that time. However, at this point, we're not at the point where the dollar is going to disappear. The government's going to take all your money and control it. That we're not even close to that stage yet. And the importance of the dollar is the fact of its strength. its liquidity and its accessibility and its stability. So to destroy that is almost something we as a nation would have to do. There are ways other nations could harm us with that, like dumping all of our treasuries on the market or something like that, but it would destroy them as much as us. So it would be a very highly unlikely scenario in which that's the case. So I don't see that as an issue right now, though I can see people trying. Okay, what do you think of a Department of Government efficiency with Elon Musk running it? I actually like the idea of a Department of Government efficiency. Take Elon Musk out of the picture because of the things I talked about today. So just take a moment. Literally, I pulled it up here just in case they want me to screen share, to go to the GAO.gov and just spend a little time learning what our own government is saying, how badly we're managing our money. No partisanship, no opinions, just how, I mean, we have so much room to create so much more money, to do so many of the things that we say is important, whether it's housing, whether it's wages, whether it's lower taxes, all these things people want to do. We have the resources without having to put a massive amount of debt out there, just by creating a more efficient government. An efficient government does not mean we're getting rid of stuff. Few people, you can be a great supporter of the school system. You could believe that teachers are underpaid and we should be raising our taxes and giving them more money. But few people say, I think the Department of Education is so well run and they use every dollar wisely and there's no waste. There's no layers of bureaucracy. There's a lot of room there. So I like the idea of a government department of efficiency. Again, Musk running it, I have no idea how he could run it. So maybe he inspires it. The trick is going to be, how do you get that one group of people in there that's not going to be corrupted by the tremendous pressure they're going to get from the departments not to touch them. So I don't know how this is going to run. Conceptually, it sounds like a great idea. The devil's in the details, so we'll see how that goes. What areas of government do you, great, throw me under the bus here, do you think we should be cutting funds to? It's hard for me to answer that question. I'm not in Washington. I'm not a political expert. So it's not necessarily the department as a whole. It's more so the efficiency within the department. But it goes against the department's desire to cut back and create more efficiency. It goes against the fact they can't ask for as much funding. Imagine that. Imagine if you get $100 billion a year to run your department. And all of a sudden you come out and say, hey, great, I just found a way to save $20 billion by creating a more efficient, better running. Oh, technology, great, wonderful. We can use technology. There are people still using, carbon paper in some government departments. I know that for a fact, right? So technology, create efficiency. Look, we just saved $20 billion a year. And then so as the government go, okay, here's 20 billion less for you. And then they lose power. So it's this weird idea, the more money they have, the more power they have, the more stable their jobs are. So it's almost like changing that whole system of how we support organizations. I don't know if I was a president, I'd go and say, hey, everybody, we're gonna, everybody has to cut 20% out of their budget. I mean, 20% of their spending. I'd just come back to us, the report, I'm gonna cut 20% out. And nobody's gonna do it unless you threaten them. Like you said, we're closing your department down. You have to be a mean president. By the way, you're just the president, you still have Congress. It's hard to do, right? It's hard to inspire people to cut back because they're actually taking away their funding. So a different system would be better. So that was a long way of answering a simple question. I don't look at a department and go, this is a bad idea. I think we can be more efficient with every department? Yes. I personally believe we have too much regulation because I have 7 regulatory bodies that oversee the work I do, and the redundancy is insane. Do you know I take 7 different ethics exams every year? 7. So apparently it's different, if I trade commodities or stocks. That's it's just so much bureaucracy, which takes time away from me spending with you guys, which I way rather do. But there's just so much bureaucracy, so much unnecessary, so much redundancy, because again, that's how departments create their power and strength. So I would go the other direction, say there's not a single department I can imagine I wouldn't be able to come back and cut money out of by creating efficiencies, rather than saying this department is useless. However, I'm not an expert in the government. Maybe there really is literally made up weird, useless departments there. Yeah, you can tell I'm not running for office. I'm not remotely prepared for that question. Okay, speaking about inefficiencies, there are not only in government, Elon Musk laid off 90% of the Twitter employees, and the company keeps going. When asked how he was able to do this, he answered something like, I don't know how other companies could not do it. Question, what about Silicon Valley? Now following Twitter's example and having this kind of massive layoffs. This is actually a challenge. Actually, that is another challenge that the Trump administration will have. Do you remember the port strike that we had a couple months back? And they decided, because I'm sure Biden was like, please, not now, it's an election. They're pushing it out, their strike out until January. One of the demands of the union, the dock workers, the port unions, using the right terminology, was that they could not use technology to replace workers. Now we're all just sitting back going, what? That's kind of how progress happens, right? Well, unions are very, very powerful, especially dock workers unions. And the idea of that a single union person loses their job was unacceptable to them. And so the companies running these ports are saying, we're in trouble. We're already so much more inefficient than all the other, not all, many of the other developed country ports in the world. We're like so inefficient because we have so many more people doing that. We need a guy to count the containers. Like technology can do this. And again, I'm not picking on unions. I'm not picking on the port workers. I'm saying that when you say, hey, we can't lay people off and use technology instead, you're halting progress, and that makes us less efficient going forward. So a balancing point always is how do you integrate new technology, less workers, and finding new roles for these workers so we don't have a lot of layoffs. And you've seen this in the past with manufacturing, right? The more robots came in, the more assembly lines that came in, the less people are needed. And this is a constant thing when a lot of our jobs and companies moved off overseas. You also saw that. So the technology sector hasn't experienced what manufacturing has experienced, what a lot of other sectors have experienced with innovation changing the makeup of the workforce. And this may well be what it is. It maybe you just don't need that many people, not because a company was necessarily bloated. It also could be because technology is eliminating more and more jobs. And this is going to happen at a faster and faster rate because of the advent of AI and a lot of the technologies around that. Again, I'll have a whole speaker come in and talk about this in more detail because it's fascinating. And that is it. So efficiency is efficiency. And the technology sector is ripe for this. And I think you could potentially see more of that happening as it changes. However, a lot of these people just move and create another business. Technology is also constantly growing and expanding. So again, cannot speak with the expertise there in detail, but that's definitely something to look at going forward. It is another question. Silicon Valley, is AI really useful, or is it something that is spun by tech brothers in order to continue redistributing existing wealth rather than the creation of wealth? What change would all this betting on AI backfire? Here's the thing with AI, and I think it's going to be outside the scope of the time I have today. Sorry, the sun is literally coming on me, so you're just going to see me glowing here in a moment. AI is almost impossible to describe the scope and magnitude of it. I've heard AI described by some very, very smart people as a digital species. Let that sink in for a moment. Digital species. It literally at this point is beyond our capability to control it or slow it down. It is a global phenomenon and is moving at a very, very rapid rate. One thing that you may well notice, despite the fact that it was very popular in the California legislature, when the regulations came up to try to contain AI, even though it was very popular, this is California, it was very popular in the legislature. When it got to Newsom's desk, he didn't sign it. I believe, from what I've been told, and again, I don't have direct knowledge to this, so I don't want to be passing rumors. I'm just going to say that I've been told this by people that probably do know. Basically, him signing that would put California at a massive competitive disadvantage with not only other states but the rest of the world very quickly. So he got a few calls from a few people in Silicon Valley, basically saying, "You sign it, we're out of here." He didn't sign it. Okay, and that is that's the importance of, you cannot contain this. It is not a made up thing. There could be a wealth redistribution from people who understand and can utilize this space or work in spaces that can. It's not that complicated. If you're not building it, it's not complicated. And those who don't, and I'm seeing this in companies right now. We're seeing companies who have made this investment in this space and how fast they're outgrowing their competition. So we're not putting the cat or the genie back in the bottle or a cat in the bag. This is what it is. And there's very little that we can do to regulate, control it, because if we do, the rest of the world will vastly outproduce us in this space or outdevelop us in this space very quickly. Again, I'm not speaking as a technology expert, so I'm totally cool be having that rebutted by anybody that has a deeper knowledge of the subject than I do. Should we expect a recession next year if Trump has the taxes lowered for the ultra wealthy? It wouldn't affect a recession or not a recession. Recession doesn't have much to do with taxes. Highest probability at this point, if Trump does what he says he's going to do, and I'm giant if, okay, and I'm not even picking on Trump here. Politicians say one thing when they campaign, governing is very different. So let's say Trump does what he says he's going to do. Trump's focus, no point during his campaigning did he say anything about touching taxes, lowering taxes for the wealthy. All of his tax proposals that he mentioned, again, that he talked about doing, were for the working class. No taxes on tips, or the retired working class, call it. No taxes on Social Security, no taxes on overtime. He spoke about a number of these things at length and more often. So I'm going to say that's where he's going to focus. I don't think he's going to focus on lowering tax for the wealthy. A fun fact about the Tax Cuts, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was passed under his first administration, was the fact that per the IRS, for 2018 tax filings compared to 2017, again, another great data source, irs.gov, the people who benefited the most, who had their taxes lowered the most from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was passed in 2017, so 2018 was the first tax year. The income group that benefited the most in a percentage basis was the people making between 50 and 100,000 a year. The second group, the group with the second biggest tax reduction in a percentage basis, was the people making 0 to 50,000 a year. And it progressively decreased, and the people who were making over $1 million a year got less than 10% of tax cut. It was like 7% or something like that went there. So on a percentage basis, the people that were making 0 to 100,000 a year got the far biggest benefit from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So now here's where the Democrats were correct, okay, because they weren't lying when they say that the millionaires got the biggest benefit from Trump's tax cuts. On a dollar basis, yes, because if you're making over $1 million and you're getting 5 to 7%, dollar-wise, you're going to get more of a tax cut than someone who's getting 25%, but they're making 70,000 a year. So technically, on dollars, yes, there was more benefit at the higher ends of it, but on true numbers, like how much difference it made in people's lives, because percentages matter when you're dealing with various income levels. It really was more for the middle class. Why was that the case? 24% tax bracket was expanded significantly. More people fell in that bracket. And also the doubling of the standard deduction. So again, I'm not taking sides here. But I always like to say, hey, it's not just them. So if Trump does what he says he's going to do, none of his proposals were for the wealthy. Again, subject to change. So we'll kind of watch how that goes. Let's see. So I said, "You are my hero. Thank you." Aw. Well, thank you. No, I feel like this is a good job. I'm doing my work here to bring these things up to everyone's attention. And the other question said, you should run for president. I actually seriously I thought about it once. I said I should just do it. We can't get any worse than what we got out there. I'm not an expert, but probably couldn't do any worse than anyone else. At least I care and I listen and I'm learning and I'm not political. And then I realized I couldn't do what I love more than anything, which is working with you guys. I love what I do. My work isn't work. It's a purpose. It's a life purpose to help other people navigate the financial world. Markets, the economy, the taxes, the estate planning, the real estate. I love this. I'll do it as long as I can think. So yeah, that would be I couldn't do this and be president at the same time. So perhaps one day I'll be the president's muse. They'll call me and ask for advice and I'll tell them to do it. I don't need the, what do you call it? The fame, the fortune, the notoriety. I don't want all that. But I would love very, very much, however, to see a well-run country where we can have a lot less of this divisiveness and more working together for solutions. Okay, so I'm going to run over to the last few questions in case any more come in here. Some companies are ending remote work. Will this continue? Question mark, sad face, sad face. I don't know. it's one of those things that there's two pieces. So let's call it the government, okay, the government, and then also the private sector. So there's a big push to get a lot of people in Washington back to in the office. And I think the big reason is, wait for it, you can't really ask for more money to run your, offices if you don't have people there. So it's a funding. Hey, I want to get more money from the government, but we can't justify it because our people aren't here in the office. Because of productivity, there's been constant productivity studies done both within the government and also in the private sector showing, again, you can cherry pick data any way you want, but there's not really showing a consistent, meaningful difference. Some people work better in an office environment and other people work better in a remote environment. I work in both environments, and I'll tell you that there's certain things I love to do when I'm working remote. Love it. No disruptions, just clear-headed. Trading is a great one. Trading right now is tax harvest season. That's actually better. No disruptions. Head down, work, 12 hours flies by, right? I don't even notice it. Whereas in the office, which is a good thing, right? There's a social element. You connect to the people you work with. You talk, sometimes you'll talk about work, sometimes you talk about something else. There's a bonding. Ideas can bubble up to the surface that may not happen when you're having that weekly Zoom meeting. So both of them have an advantage, and perhaps the future will be more of a hybrid type of thing. Or we get together once a quarter and the rest of the time working remotely. Different jobs may require, or have different advantages to being remote or in person. I can tell you with Sequoia and our 23 people that we're going to continue flexible work schedule. Hybrid, remote, what everybody wants to do. As long as the work's getting done, the clients are taken care of, and we're compliance with all the laws. I want people to be happy. You want to work from home, you want to work in the office. Some of our team, they want to be in the office every day. They don't want to work from home. Other people are like, I don't want to be in the office. And most are hybrid. That's a wonderful place. And I really think that's one of the best things that come out of the pandemic is more flexibility in how people work. And I'll just give an example real quick. I was working remote one day, and I realized I forgot to take something out for dinner to defrost. And it was really cool because right between meetings, I ran over real quick and took some out of the freezer and threw it in the kitchen sink and went right back to work. Saved me having to go eat out. So just sharing a fun fact about that. But other people too could have an opportunity. Maybe they can, take a break 2 hours in the middle of the day and spend time with their kids, helping them with their homework, and then work in the evening. Like that allows people to have much more work-life balance. And I'm a big advocate of it, and I really hope that they keep it. I understand some companies want to bring people back. Amazon was a big one. It's their choice. A lot of them are just trying to fill the office space. And I can't speak for what they think is the right thing to do or not do. However, being really mindful of what the people need to have the best possible quality of life, I think is something companies should really look at rather than we got to fill our office space. Personal opinion, they're not really an economic opinion. So I know we're running up against time here. It's a really great questions. Thank you so much for sending them in. Do know that anyone that wants to talk to me individually, if you feel you have more questions to answer, I will do my very best. We'll schedule time to talk. This is year end, so there's a lot more trading days for me because I'm doing that glorious thing I talked to you all about before, which is called tax harvesting. So any of you have taxable accounts with me, I'm doing my very best to give you the holiday gift you don't even notice because you don't see it on the performance report, but you will see it on your taxes over time. I think I'm going to say in a general thing is that there's not as much I can do this year. The markets are up a lot. Some of you will feel a little bit of tax pain this year. It's because we did really well. Also got to protect your portfolio. So I'd rather pay a little bit of taxes now. If you're paying taxes, it's because we did well. So just keep that in mind. I minimize it as much as I possibly can. However, also prudent portfolio management is important. This is why each of you have customized portfolios. And this is why I spend a tremendous number of hours at the end of the year doing this for you to give you the best possible experience now and in the future within the space of tax harvesting. So my meeting time's a little limited between now and the end of the year. However, if you got important questions, I'll find a way get them answered for you because there's a lot going on in the world right now, and I want to make sure that your questions are answered. Ultimately, regardless of how you feel with the outcome of the election or anything else going on in the world right now, my highest recommendation is focus on the things that bring you joy. Focus on the things that bring meaning to you and to those that you love and care for. It's really easy to get caught into the news and get caught into all the stressful stuff. Change the focus. I know for myself, if I've had a high activity day, I'm really blessed on the days I'm in Nevada as I can go home and go touch my horses. And I don't know what it is about horses, but they'll chill you out like right away. So you got dogs, you got cats, you got pet rats like me. Go hug your animals, hug your kids. Just focus on the things that bring you joy. Take a walk in nature. This all too shall pass, and we don't know what the future will bring. None of us do. So focus on the things that you enjoy the most, and do ask if you have any questions. Thank you all very, very much for listening, coming to this event today, and do share the recording with others that may have a lot of questions as well. And again, thank you for coming, and thank you for the questions. I'll see you next month. Bye for now.